Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of the Publisher Lab. My name is Manny Ramos and I'm joined here today by the famous Terrence Timmons and John Cole. How's it going, fellas?
Hey, Manny.
Good to have you guys back.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of great stories here on the docket today, so let's just jump right into it. The first one is social media news, where we're seeing a lot of Americans flocking to TikTok for their news. We're seeing a major shift in how Americans consume news. Since 2020, TikTok has seen news consumption nearly double, reflecting a broader trend towards digital channels. Today, 58% of Americans prefer digital news over traditional TV, radio, or print. Notably, half of the population now gets news from social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and even LinkedIn. This trend is most pronounced among adults under 30, with a staggering 255% increase in TikTok news consumption. Interestingly, news platforms' preferences vary by gender, with women favoring Nextdoor, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, while men lean towards Reddit, X, and YouTube. And as social media evolves, users are increasingly turning to search engines and news aggregation apps, prompting platforms like Google to prioritize authoritative and trustworthy content. So first question for you guys is, what platforms do you guys typically go to for news?
I'll
You go
take things
first.
away here. So as a young millennial, my go-to apps or platforms for news right now, number one is YouTube, big YouTuber. Number, I guess, two would be like Reddit or Google searching. So Google News, but I usually have preferences on which links to click. There's some bias in there. And then number three would probably be X. So I guess I'm in line exactly with what the data shows.
Yeah. So
Not
do you
too
use
much
TikTok?
surprise.
Do you use TikTok at all?
So no, I do not use TikTok.
No, it's
I'm-
funny because I was talking to one of the guys in the office yesterday and he was like, oh yeah, I use TikTok for everything now. I was like,
Yeah.
really? And I've always just thought, I don't really want the Chinese government spying on me, so I don't really fancy
Yeah.
it. But I think it's surprising. I mean, well, maybe it's surprising, maybe it's not, but TikTok, the reason that they've become so popular is they've really got the algorithms down.
It's the engagement is really dialed in on TikTok, and that's part of
Yeah.
the reason why I don't use it, because I think it's a little too engaging, too much
Yeah.
attention is going to be pulled into it, and
Yeah.
I want some control over it. So maybe I'm a little bit, I guess, conservative in that viewpoint in trying to control it.
I was getting dropped off at the airport to come over here, and the guy was waiting outside, just sat there scrolling. And I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, what are you looking at?" He's like, "Oh, TikTok." And he's kind of like my age, a bit of an older guy, just sort of drives because he likes it. And I was kind of surprised, but he said, "Yeah, my daughter got me into it," and I think that intergenerational
Mhm.
move is happening through
Yeah.
kids. And
So-
if you show somebody something, it's like, "Oh, I might go and check that out myself."
So I guess, John, at your age, what would be like your preferred medium for news?
I'm not typical probably.
Yeah.
I'm once a week I actually buy a newspaper. I get the
Yeah.
FT Weekend, which I think is really good quality journalism. I really like it. During the week I look at the BBC News app and I use X.
Gotcha.
And
So it's still
that's it.
a mobile device with a couple apps, but then you still have an analog source that you like to
I do, yeah.
come to every week.
I do. I think it's because, and it's not every week, but I would say most weeks. And I think it's because when I sit down, I like to really absorb, particularly the financial stuff. And the FT, they cover everything. But I think I absorb better when I'm just, sometimes I go to the pub and have a beer and I just sit and read. And it's kind of
Yeah,
old fashioned.
Very
But it's a
classy.
bit of me time.
Yeah,
and
you get
it
that
is-
personal space. Yeah.
and it's personal space, and it's sort of like but I think, just look at print sales worldwide. I mean, it's been on the decline
100%.
for so long.
Yeah, and then I guess just a little point on this data we see here, which is digital devices are preferred. We see the same thing with website traffic, where the share of mobile to desktop has only been increasing year over year, more towards mobile. I think right now it's like 66% mobile. Just generally what we see in the data, and also from trends, everyone wants a mobile phone. So it makes 100% sense why you'll see that trend. And my viewpoint on the whole, which news platform does a user use is the user just going to use whatever gives them the best answer. So whether that be, via TikTok or maybe at YouTube and followers they have there, or maybe seeing people on X, they're just going to go to whatever place gives them that best answer. Usually it could be Google search, whatever it is. So it's going to kind of break things up a bit, just online, find their best sources, and people are going to spin into those pockets.
Yeah. I think it's this Google search satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And Google said that's probably the number one ranking algorithm of all time is, did they get what they wanted when they looked for it and they arrived somewhere?
Exactly.
And I think any good algorithm, TikTok included, will be reinforcing what they want, which is more engagement. So they're sort of time wormholes that you can get into. I think that's one of the things that I find difficult is when I feel like I've just wasted, 45 minutes just with mind chewing gum. Yeah, it's like, ugh, I don't feel great. But I do like to keep up with things. So maybe I'll try it. Probably not. But yeah, I would say I'm not typical. But these platforms, we can't ignore them. They are going to, they're just going to get bigger.
Yeah. And you also bring up an interesting point, which is that contrast between like doom scrolling and just kind of mindlessly going through content versus having an attention and drilling down and finding that specific information. And I feel like those are two use cases that are seen here. So the individual preferences are probably going to be based off those preferences. So for me, if I'm doom scrolling Instagram, TikTok, 100% sense. But something specific, I want more of like a research platform like a Google or some other like database to look and find specific information, maybe ChatGPT, because it can generalize really well too.
Yeah. And I think the personal skill of finding things out, which we've all, I've learned that you've grown up with, as GPT and other large language models will serve things up to us, that skill may diminish over time because the curiosity that we all have is just like, oh, is that real? Like, let's go and find something else. And you balance it up. If you're given an answer from an answer engine, that's a very different experience.
It just, here you go.
I just realized I got my phone in my pocket.
No, I definitely agree with you guys in the sense of with so many people going to digital apps now for their news, I think it's just an ease of use thing. I couldn't tell you the last time I went out to buy a newspaper, and my dad was someone who would get the newspaper every week as well. And slowly but surely, he's even starting to switch over to just using, social media, which, seeing it in my parents is definitely like different than seeing it in someone who's younger than me. You kind of expect it with the younger audience, but when you're seeing it with the older audience, you could tell that this is definitely going to be something that's going to stick. And we're also like wondering if with all this consumption of digital news, is it something where eventually the AI is going to leave us, or it's going to be something where people are then going to be manipulating the news using AI, which is something that YouTube is kind of addressing with their latest new policy. They have a new policy for AI generated content. Here's what creators need to know. If your content includes AI generated alterations or synthetic media like deepfakes, you must inform your viewers. Mandatory labels and disclosures are now required in your video descriptions, especially for sensitive subjects. If you fail to comply, you could face serious consequences, including video removal, account suspension, or being kicked out of the YouTube Partner Program. For viewers, there's more control in their hands. You can request the removal of AI-generated content that someone's face or voice that uses someone's face or voice without consent. And for the music community, AI music imitating an artist's voice can be taken down, though factors like parody and public interest will be considered, which is interesting to think about because I feel like parody is very subjective, right? Like if you have like a Drake song, right, and the entire song sounds legit, but at the very end they make a joke, is it a parody? Like where are we gonna draw the line with that? But what's your guys' take that any video that's on YouTube now is going to require a label if it's using AI content?
So I believe you mentioned you had some strong feelings about this. So why don't we dig into that a little bit?
Well, I would say, I mean, not so much strong. I see that Google have to do this for YouTube. Like there's a legal threat for them. They have to do it. I think it's a bit of lip service because they've got to appear to be trying to control, but they can't control. But they want to be able to point to a rule if they kick someone out. But I mean, everything's got AI now. Like all videos, pretty much. You look at any, like, I'm thinking about TV ads and things like that I saw on the plane on the way over here. And I was like, for years now, you've had like cars flying through the air, and you know, it's all generated through animation and AI, and they don't have to put a disclaimer in front of the ads. But you have to put a disclaimer in front of the content. Like, it's there's a bit of double standards there, but I can see the political reasons why. Yeah. But we are walking into this world of partial truths.
Everything's going to be manipulated in some way using AI.
Yeah, sampled music being blended with original music. Yeah, I mean that's been going on for decades anyway. But you always had to put an attribution next to it, featuring so and so. Like, I think, correct. I think some sort of modern acknowledgement of when something isn't genuinely real.
Yeah. I see this as almost like a way for YouTube to sort of just cover themselves in case something goes wrong. Yeah. Because I can see cases where it's not very harmful, like someone, creating a video that has AI generated images and they use it to enhance their content. That's not harmful, but they're going to have a disclaimer. But then someone, let's say, is now taking a political figure, running a deep fake on them, having them say specific things. Yeah, that is problematic. Yeah, and then the gray area where you get into parody, maybe someone takes a likeness of an artist, but not fully. They just change a bit where it's legally okay. Yeah, and then generate a song that's really popular and people love. Yeah, so
very difficult.
Exactly.
Taylor Swift spelt slightly differently, looks a bit like her, sounds like her, sort of. Like, it's just, whoa, how are you going to enforce this? And you could say, I would come back to the idea of the law. Like, and we can't have laws for everything. So you have this, certainly in English common law, which I think is the basis for American law, reasonableness. So you say something, what would a reasonable person say was reasonable? And it's the same thing, I think, with these kind of rules. You can't make the rules foolproof. There's no way that Google are going to be able to do that. And the enforcement is going to be subjective, no matter what happens.
I do think there's one case where, I don't know if you've seen this, but as an avid YouTube user, I found channels where they generate 100% of their content using AI. So you can tell the text is written or generated by ChatGPT. All the images are generated by Midjourney, and they compile it using some editor and then throw it on YouTube. And then it gets picked up in the algorithm because they make a really good title and thumbnail. Yep. And then they do the same thing on shorts also. Yep. And they generate millions of views.
I've seen
just farming ads. Yeah. And they're not actually, like, the person's not actually involved too much in the content. They're just running through a machine.
Yeah. And actually, as the AI gets better, it's going to be harder to see the difference.
Yeah.
Because those ones where they've taken some footage from something and then they have a voiceover, and the script, you can tell, has been generated by AI. The voice sounds a bit AI-ish, but as that voice becomes more normal,
more real,
you
won't be able to tell.
Yeah. So I can see, I mean, this is a good move from YouTube.
Yeah. Just can't wait for the first Mr. Beast video that will have an AI disclaimer on it.
Yeah. Are we going to do AI disclaimers, Manny, on this show?
I'm not sure because...
Am I real?
I don't know if I'm real half the time. This beard is completely AI generated. So I really don't know how much AI you even have to be using in order to be required to put that label. Is it just like the most minuscule? Like if I...
Reasonable,
right? Yeah. So if I upload this podcast to a machine that then cuts up the shorts for me and provides captions, do I need to then label that I'm using AI for
Probably
that?
Not.
Probably, yeah.
No, so I guess it's more like where there's some malicious intent.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's to do with the intent and also the beneficial party being ripped off or benefiting.
Someone just steals someone else's likeness and then put words in their mouth.
Yeah.
Or takes something and just subtly changes a couple words to make it seem a little bit different.
Oh, goodness me. It's so interesting, isn't it? Talking about this stuff. It's like, wow, what is going to happen in the future?
I think a big thing in the future is going to be humans are going to learn to discern real from fake. And they're going to get better at having, I guess, more sophisticated bullshit detector.
Yeah.
And that's going to become a skill that everyone's going to be developing, because there's so much different information out there. It's hard to pinpoint the truth. Usually my method is the truth is somewhere in between. So you have to be really disciplined on looking at something that agitates you, an opposite viewpoint, or something that you agree with. And then the truth is somewhere in that middle point. And it's a hard skill.
Yeah.
But I feel like more people are going to be forced to adapt that skill moving forward.
And maybe, trusted curators.
Yeah.
So in effect, going back to the Financial Times example, I trust the editorial team to serve me up with a selection of things that they're used to doing. I like the fact they're not really like biased one way or another. Politically, they're somewhere in the middle. It really just, how does this affect the world economy?
Yep.
And they do a lot of in-depth stuff that I wouldn't find necessarily through an algorithm, which the algorithm, it might, talk about the apple juice industry or something like that, which I would never be served up unless I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I've decided that rather than having it served to me.
So would you say trusting the curator of that content is going to become such an important factor for the end user?
Yeah, because I guess an algorithm is it's an avatar of an editor, right?
Yeah.
It's a sort of copy. It's a machine copy of what editors used to do. And that's why really famous and fantastic sort of editorial teams, it's a shame that they're not sort of held in high esteem so much anymore, because they've been sort of replaced by, the Facebook algo.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe that old kind of New York editor, sort of the brash guy who sort of like comes in and screams at his reporters, maybe that'll come back in fashion. I don't think so, but I guess maybe I'm just being nostalgic.
No,
sorry, Manny. I'm going off on one here.
No, you're great. No, you're good. It's definitely like, it's funny that you bring up like the old timey, publisher that's screaming at his editors and stuff. And then I see coworkers who are using AI sitting next to me, and they're getting just as angry with the AI. So it's, it's just kind of like a shift, but it's still keeping the same theme of like, interacting with the robot now. But moving on to some publishing news, we're starting to see ad blocking or ad blockers on the rise, with a staggering 912 million users worldwide actively avoiding ads on both mobile and desktop. This trend is particularly notable on mobile devices, where ad revenue per page is lower compared to desktop. The shift from desktop to mobile browsing is expected to further fuel the use of mobile ad blockers. The decline of third-party cookies, especially on platforms like Safari, is squeezing publishers' ability to monetize their audience effectively. In the US alone, downloads of the top 5 ad blocking apps jumped by 17% from the second quarter to the third quarter of 2023. Publishers are now seeking new solutions like iOS Block-Through, which taps into acceptable ad programs, allowing certain ads to reach users who typically block them. Niche publishers, particularly those dependent on display ads, face a higher risk from the growing trend and are exploring models that reward users with free content for engaging with ads. It's a changing landscape, and both publishers and advertisers need to adapt to these evolving new preferences. So with the increased use of ad blockers, it's definitely going to be harder for publishers to be making money off of their content. And I think for the last few months, one of the things that Tyler has really pushed on this podcast is the idea of diversifying your content and not just relying on one source, and being able to kind of monetize on multiple different mediums, not only just your written content, your video content, and where you're posting your video content. But I wanted to get your guys' take, especially yours, Terrence, since you are a website owner and publisher. How do you see ad blockers, and what is something that you could potentially do to kind of circumvent this problem?
Yeah. So first things first, they say there's 912 million active ad block users on mobile and desktop, and then it says there's an increase on mobile. So I think they kind of throw in that metric a little bit to kind of make it seem bigger than it actually is. How I see ad blockers generally on sites, it's the cost of business, and there's going to be a plateau on percentage of users that use ad block. However, I definitely see more users understanding that trade-off on ads in exchange for free content. And that trade-off, I think, is becoming more clear as the days go on. And because of that, I think more users are going to be willing to like, okay, ads are on this page, I'll just deal with it because I'm going to help that end publisher, the end content creator. Same thing how like someone says YouTube, hey, thank you for subscribing, or hey, we really appreciate it if you turn off your ad blockers for my channel. I think that trend in combination with this means it's not going to be that noticeable. I will say though, on Safari and different browsers, there is a monetization difference on how cookies work, and that probably will have a bigger difference on your traffic. For example, if you have all your users on Chrome versus all users on Safari, Chrome is probably going to earn you like 2x more.
Yeah. My cynicism level is quite high on this story, because it's literally in the interests of companies like EO to push these kind of stories, because the more people know about ad blockers, the more people use them.
100%.
A lot of people don't even think about them, especially on mobile. You're just like, take it.
The bar of entry to get ad blockers on mobile is much higher than desktop.
That's right.
You got to install an app, configure settings. While on desktop, it's just a Chrome extension. You click, go.
So I'll tell you a funny story, which was in the, I think, late 2000s or maybe early 2010s. The newspapers in Germany got together to ask their users not to use ad blockers, and they used their own newspaper, like full page ads and things like that, using their own media to try to stop people from doing that. Guess what happened?
More people used it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the oxygen of publicity here is, I don't really want to talk about this too much, because honestly, everybody that listens to this podcast are probably people who are just in our industry, and they probably, I do experiment with ad blockers, and I just sort of see what it looks like with and without sometimes. Most people on their phones don't use ad blockers. That's still the case.
Yep.
I think we shouldn't get over focused on it. I think everybody worries about the money they're losing. I think it's more important to focus on the user experience.
100%.
And if you're giving the users what they want, so monitoring things like navigation bounces, your overall bounce rate by landing page, earnings by landing page. Yeah, exactly. Page views per visit metrics, scroll percentage, all of those user UX things that, let's be honest, a lot of publishers don't spend that much time looking at their top landing page over time and seeing how the bounce rates changing by browser, or how much money they make by geo. I think you can go down a sort of a negative rabbit hole here, worrying about ad block and how much is being taken from you. Whereas young people who don't want to see ads, if you start showing them ads, like that whole acceptable ads program, I think it's just doing a deal with the devil. I mean, it's a shakedown.
To the user,
yeah. Well, I mean, showing ads to people who don't want to see ads doesn't seem like a good idea. Also, incentivizing people to see ads in exchange for content. Incentivized traffic for advertisers has been tested again and again and again, and you just end up with poor quality from the advertiser's perspective, and then it doesn't translate well.
Yeah.
So let's move on.
So it's interesting that just us talking about this will get more attention to an ad blocker to basically wasted energy at that point.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are ad blocker recovery programs out there. I think we've been testing some of them, and I think it's okay if you can do it in a smart way.
Yeah.
But to give them a full ad experience and completely overcome the ad blocker, it doesn't seem like a good idea.
I did like your point touching on the user experience and navigation metrics.
That's more important.
And I started a website with my brother with that philosophy in mind. we literally designed the website with what would a user want to see with this type of content, and how should you structure the page in a way that appeals to this search intent.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you have that philosophy going into it, all this ad stuff is secondary.
Yes, absolutely.
And then it's going to be a great experience for users. You're going to get traffic on there eventually. And then
don't put the cart before the horse, 100%. Sort of like you got to, content's number one, but really it's the user and what they get out of it.
Yep.
Like, do they get what they actually want?
And again, if a user sees ads, they're probably just like, yeah, it's because this is free.
Yeah.
And they move on. Maybe they see something they like, they click on it, they make a purchase. And you make some revenue.
Yeah. That's how this whole ad thing works, hey?
Yeah.
Still working.
Well, we'll see how publishers tend to adapt with the ad blockers, which we should definitely stop using that. The software that shall not be named. But going from users blocking ads to websites blocking Google Bard, we're seeing now over 250 websites, including well-known names like Ziff Davis, Vox, the New York Times, Condé Nast, and Yelp, have taken significant steps by blocking Google Extended. This move, which has seen a dramatic 180% increase in the past month, is a response to concerns about AI companies using their content. These websites are using robots.txt to block Google Extended, a Google product designed to limit access to websites' content by Bard, Vertex AI-generated APIs, and future AI models. However, it's important to note that this action does not completely prevent their content from appearing in Google's search generative experience or being used to train SGE. The decision reflects the growing tension between content creators and AI companies over the use of monetization of online content. And that's really been a growing theme throughout the year, and not just in publishing. With a graphic design background, that's kind of one of the biggest things that a lot of designers are concerned with. You spend so much time creating this artwork, and then if you're able to just kind of feed that as a reference into AI, someone could then recreate your work without any issues or problems. So what's your guys' take on these websites just collectively saying, no, we're not going to allow AI content or AI to search through our content?
Yeah. A couple points I want to mention before really digging into it is, first of all, mentions 250 websites. It's not too many. Of course, these are larger publisher websites. So Vox, New York Times, and big time publishers. So what they're saying is, hey, the content on our site is unique enough and has enough value where if we block it, it's going to give us some leverage that we can later on use, which may be the case, maybe not. I don't know how unique their content really is. However, what this isn't saying, which I think is really important, is smaller publishers that don't have a unique data set, they can't really do much in terms of what's being included into a large language model for its optimization. So what that turns into is basically, is the content you create going to have extra value added to that large language model or no? If the answer is yes, then maybe you could do something to build up a unique set over time. If the answer is no, well, there's probably nothing you can do because you want to be on Google search, and the exchange you make being on Google search is saying, hey, it's okay for you to scrape all my content, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's a hedge for them, and also I look at this as almost like a cry for help, which is, you've been taking our stuff for years. We used to have this arrangement where we would get some value users coming to our website in return. And now with Google Snippets, Knowledge Graph, it's been going on for a long time, this wedge between the content creator and the beneficial purveyor of it is getting wider and wider. And that's Google. And
it's almost too late.
I think so. And the genie is literally out of the bottle. I applaud them for doing it, but I don't think it's going to help.
Yeah,
I don't think. I think we were saying before we started the show, like there's a lot of doom and gloom feelings about publishing and what's going to happen to the web and all of those feelings. There is some good news here in the fact that if you can train AI models on with specific, let's say, specific data. So that, in my opinion, there should be no reason why the New York Times can't have its own large language model.
That's like the New York Times with like the essence of their writers and
That's right.
their tone and their stories.
In the same way I said before, like the avatar of an editor is there in the algorithm.
100%.
It could. I mean, there's definitely some opportunity here. Do you know what I mean? Like there is some opportunity. There is going to be value creation. It's just right now it looks like this large language model game is too big for ordinary companies to even go anywhere near. If you want to actually construct your own models, but I think the off the shelf and the commoditization of large language models will make this all available to all publishers, small and big, in the future. So where the monetization comes from, I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say video. So, like, I don't know, you go and chat with the New York Times, and it's almost like you've got your own newsreader. I don't know.
And then so I'm conceptualizing this a bit. And let's say I'm the New York Times, and I have this unique set of all of our articles we ever published with all of the writers and their tones and everything. So then I take that data, throw it into an AI model, like large language model, curate it, fine tune it to match our specific style of reporting, maybe with our biases intended to be in there because that's what our readers like. And then we sort of take all that data, compact it into one AI agent that can then be used in like our app or some other service that gets their users, maybe subscribers, to use for free, and then basically creates another funnel point where they can access and say, hey, I just read this article about, for example, the conflict happening around the world. Can you give me some points on A, B, and C in the same tone that I'm normally used to on the New York Times? And then boom, it generates, hey, this is the context of, like, let's say in Gaza, like the history of it, right? And then you can learn extra points on it without having to go to another article. Yeah. Instead, you're there just asking it, and it's just pulling references and tones from its existing data pool.
Like a meta news service curated for you.
Exactly.
I could see that. For small publishers, I don't think it's a good idea to be blocking Bard and the other models right now. I don't think that the upside is there for anyone. I think it's almost too late as well, because whatever you've put out to the internet that's been indexed is already there.
There's one point which I was going to touch on a later one, but just to kind of give a sneak peek, which is creating a unique community. And what I mean by that is like a forum, like a community where you have a niche site that's super specific, but then your users are actually involved in that community by giving you user-generated content, ideas, and then as the publisher of that niche, you can then leverage that unique data set that starts to emerge and then leverage it to help your audience. And then maybe once it gets big enough, then it makes sense to block it. Or maybe block it from the start, then once it gets big enough, it has value.
Yeah. No, I don't buy it. But sorry, Terrence. But yeah, I see, the trouble is we're living in a world of aggregators. And Google's been the biggest aggregator of all time of data and information, and large language models are now trumping that with an even more sophisticated aggregator.
I do have a curious question, John. If we live in a time of aggregators, right?
Yeah.
Would you say the aggregated answer and the aggregated information is the best?
No, because I think there's a dilution when you go towards the average. And Tyler and I touched on this, I think, in the last show or the one before, about the ethics behind this. Because as you were talking about, okay, we take the New York Times and with all their biases. Now, biases aren't necessarily a set of rules. So it's really hard to emulate that.
Yeah.
Because the nuance is so subtle sometimes. In the old days, it would be somebody says, what's our position on this? Mm-hmm. And then it would be up to the people with the experience and who built up their reputation over time to make a decision. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be along party lines, because party lines are blurred now as well.
Yep.
So we're in this place where the idea of keeping to some central tenets, some ideas that are, that's what we stand for. It's harder and harder. So I think you're right in the fact that I think humans are still we can understand nuance,
Mm-hmm.
we can understand parody, we can understand humor, and hopefully, right, take a joke,
Yeah.
and not to then confuse that with then other forms of information. And I think computers are still not good enough at that to be trusted.
Yeah.
With all of our, what they feed us, because then what they feed us, we start. That's how we view and that's how we understand the world. That's what we see and hear, and how we talk. Like right now, we're thinking together, aren't we? We're talking and thinking. We're exchanging ideas. That's why podcasts are useful, right? Because it makes you think.
So our ability to identify that bias, identify that humor, identify those subtle differences in text and language, AI can't really replicate fully, and that is still where value lies if you're trying to make something unique and valuable.
That's where the short-term danger is, I think, with large language models, is that we're going to be over-relying on them too early, and they are they're a pastiche of what they learned from. And unfortunately, I mean, ChatGPT now has 100 million users. It's probably getting trained really, really, really well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why it's going to be very difficult for Google to catch up.
So basically, if I understand correctly, you're saying these language models are going to come a little too vanilla.
I think so. Yeah, but also they're going to have styles. A bit like, is it, what's the X one, Gork?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fun mode.
Yeah, fun mode. Yeah, and that's where it'll go. But it's just the start. But I think that the fighting over the training data, which is what we're talking about in this story,
kind of pointless.
It's already happened. It's been happening for years. None of us knew about it, right? If you think about it,
no one did.
Maybe the first I heard of large language models was about a year ago, and that was before they launched.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down talking to, Dwayne and some of the guys here, like, this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, there's a quote by the CEO or ex-CEO of Venmo, which is, the future is already here and we're all living in the present. And what he means by that is, right now, our ideas and everything we're thinking about and doing is based off of past ideas. And the future new stuff is already here. We just can't see it or don't know it or don't want to believe in it. So thinking back 10 years when, these large language models were forming and becoming like possibility, no one wanted to believe it, think it, or see it. And that was the future, and everyone just lived in the past.
Yeah. Good summary.
Yeah. It's fascinating because no one saw it coming, but at the same time,
we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I mean, and also we could all, I'm sure, have a stab at what's next. When you were talking just then, I was thinking everything that we're saying is now going to be going out into this same ether.
Yep.
And if you with the Ezoic project, we've always looked at data as being separate from its wrappings. So the idea of unstructured data, just the stuff itself. So whether that's text or images or video, it's not. That's the important bit. The rest of it, how it's transmitted either through a website or a podcast or a video. But I think there will be the potential future of, bots going and doing work on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Conducted by humans. I mean, it's already happening to a certain extent, but certainly this is going to be the case. And all of this data is going to be available. Whereas with the emergence of the new chips and the amount of data that can be handled in the cloud, it seems almost limitless as the like.
And I think the future is how this data is going to be utilized in creative ways. Like I see a future where, my smartphone just has all my data and boom, there's a large language model that's uniquely tuned to me. And I can just create algorithms about my life to optimize it, whether it be financial, physical, mental, emotional, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's basically already here, just hasn't been put together yet.
Yeah.
And I always think about, you'll have like a phone or a medium or something, just ask it a question, give you an answer back. And it's just going to be super easy convenience. and the mediums we use today are going to feel archaic probably in like 50 years.
Yeah, I think in 50 years. And, going back to the positive side of this, in terms of publishing, those of us who are reflecting, putting this on the rotisserie of our brains to look at it from all angles, which is what we're doing right now. I do think that we're in this bubble where we're talking about large language models and thinking about it a lot. Anybody who's in our space is thinking about it more than the average Joe on the street. Most people who are driving past outside are not thinking about it, and they're doing everything exactly sort of how they did it maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And so I think we have this period now of the next 4 or 5 years where user behavior change is going to lag behind the capabilities of what's on offer. But there'll always be the early adopters like us. We're all talking about it and we're aware of it. And I think that's where the opportunities are, is that good stuff will come out.
It's like, for example, when I tell my grandma, hey, AI isn't ChatGPT, she's like, what?
Yeah.
And then you have to go and explain it, and you realize they just, aren't quite there yet.
Oh, no, yeah.
No, but I definitely think there's going to be more development in AI, and in the next few years, we're only going to see it improve more. But to try to get rid of some of the doom and gloom from the news today,
good luck, Manny.
Let's go into some positivity. So we're seeing some search ranking improvements off of Google's latest updates. So as we all remember, Google recently rolled out a significant search ranking update, focusing on surfacing content rich in personal insight and experiences from social media, blogs, forums, and other platforms. This initiative aims to uncover hidden gems on the web where individuals share firsthand knowledge. Notably, this update is part of Google's core ranking algorithm and not just the helpful content system. The emphasis is on promoting authentic, valuable content, shifting the focus from technical SEO to the quality and authenticity of the content. This change may impact website rankings for specific queries, urging SEO professionals to adapt their strategies accordingly. In a recent podcast, Google's John Mueller, Martin Splitt, and Gary I'm sorry, I'm totally butchering this name.
Gary, I bet that poor guy's had to deal with that his whole life. Just get it right.
And I'm here just adding to the problem.
Yeah.
Discuss site quality, highlighting its subjective nature and importance of user satisfaction over technical optimization. For SEO professionals, the message is clear: prioritize creating original, helpful content and focusing on user intent to truly resonate with your audience in this evolving digital landscape. So we're seeing some positive news coming out of this. And Terrence, you were mentioning that you were actually seeing some of the positive impact on your website from this.
Yeah, so a little background, I run a personal blog that takes life stories from myself and has a data aspect to it. So an example would be, I did a trip in Europe and I mapped my, let's say, expenses per day, average per country, and basically figured out, hey, if you go to this country, you're going to spend this much per day backpacking. You go to Germany, it's going to be like 300. You go to Spain, it's going to be a little bit cheaper, right? So that's one example. So this website has those personal stories, and they're basically anecdotes, but it explains an important concept. So that concept was budgeting for traveling was the topic, with my story as like the background. And for this website, I actually haven't touched it in 2 years, and all my traffic went to zero, right? Then after the recent algorithm updates, lo and behold, it just came back out of the blue without any updates or touching it. So to me, that signals Google does like these really unique and interesting experiences that you have as an individual in life. And if Google is signaling that that's valuable, then other users are too. So how I read that is users like to read stories, and they like to have a story that explains a topic or a learning point. And if there's a story behind it, it makes it more valuable. So my advice on the positive side here is, if you're a publisher and you have a lot of old, outdated content that no longer gets traffic, maybe it did like 3 or 4 years ago, go back and look at it and see if you can add any personal stories to it. Something that isn't an aggregate of a large language model, something that is like refreshing to hear. And it's not too wordy, that, is well written and easy to understand for an average reader. And I feel like you would find a lot of success using that strategy.
How do you think Google are identifying these
So
particular sites?
if I had to guess, they probably could like take a web page, take that text data, and then generate sort of a topic summary or like a keyword on it, and then take that same keyword and run it through a large language model, and then compare the two and see like, would our large language model ever produce this part of this?
Yeah.
And then they find those differences and say, wait, this article has a lot of differences, but it's still good content. So maybe it's unique content that our large language model hasn't seen yet.
Because my understanding of how hateful, and this is separate from helpful content update, is, how many cupcake websites does the web need?
Exactly.
Or recipe sites, and how many ways are there to make lasagna? There is limited value in doing exactly the same as 10,000 other sites. Maybe you need 500 sites or 1,000 sites or 10,000 sites, but certainly not 100,000 sites all talking about lasagna,
100%.
right? So I think that's where Google's got it right. And my opinion on this would be more along the lines of the way that Google tests content, and you know this, right? Where they'll put you in 52nd position, and then they'll put you in number 3 for a day in a certain geo, and then they'll drop you down again, and then they'll look at the search satisfaction comparing the two.
Yep.
So I think what they're doing is that they're broadening, maybe not 52, maybe it's 78, or 125, to try to rotate some unusual content that's not a retread. And I think you're right in saying that maybe there would be a large language model analysis of it to see how unpredictable the content is, and if it's very broadly similar to lots and lots of other sites, then that
probably low value. Then
that's lower value. Well, and it genuinely is lower value, right?
Because as a user, why would you care?
Yeah. So welcome to my little corner of the internet where I like to talk about recipes.
I guess continuing on how Google looks at sites too, they also look at the trail of users, right? User 1 has a search result with rankings, and then their interactions on the results page, their clicks, their scroll, etc., is going to influence the results for the next user. And they do have that user bounce where each user is going to improve the results for the next user.
Yeah.
And so if, let's say, you get a chance where your unique site pops up and you have great navigation, easy to use website, then you're going to have great metrics for that user that happens to click on it. Then that's going to feed back into Google's algorithm and say, hey, this user had positive signals. The next one's probably going to have positive signals. And it just keeps going.
Yeah. And again, it's coming back to the core of what makes it good is actually the match between what people are looking for and what they get. And then all the wrappings is the sort of ancillary stuff.
Yeah.
And we've seen certain, ad treatments, for example, on the internet, where users are, all being treated the same way, and they get 15 ads and they all get refreshed and it slows the page down. Google's really good at seeing, if people have been bounced away because of that abuse of the user, and of the advertiser, if you think about it, that is not good. So, I think Google they're still the smartest search engine out there. Let's not forget, they are still the best. Did you ever try Bing yourself?
Yes, I didn't like it.
I switched over just because I thought, well, if they've got OpenAI feeding, it's going to be good.
It felt like it was more work.
Yeah, and it was really unfamiliar, and some of the results were not good.
Yeah. So for me, it's like I judge the first result a lot, and if the first result is bad, chances are I might just try a different search, or maybe click on 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
And I guess going back to the point about ads, and I guess overall site layout is, ads could be a reason a user bounces, but maybe you have something broken on your site too, or maybe you have an outdated theme or design that is not friendly. It's not easy to find what the user's looking for, and that causes a bounce too. So I think it's important as a website owners, really looking at your user experience data and just go back to first principles. Like, imagine you were putting in the search result what would you expect to be the best way for a website to answer this? And just stick to those first principles.
Yeah.
And then see from there.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to see some positive changes for publishers over the next few years. I'm just like you said, John, I'm interested to see how things develop. But that is going to conclude this week's episode. I want to say thank you again for joining us on another episode of the Publisher Lab. Thank you, John Cole and Terrence Timmons, for joining me on this episode as well. Anything else that you guys want to say? Anywhere you guys want to point our audience to?
I recently deleted my Instagram, so I can't plug that.
What made you do that?
Just one day I woke up and I was like, I'm not getting value out of this.
Right.
And then I just deleted it. Haven't looked at it.
The news quality on Instagram is terrible. I'm going to stick with TikTok.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Okay. And I guess I'll give TikTok a try. How about that?
Give TikTok a try.
I'll be the old guy on TikTok. Part of the 8% or whatever it is.
Before you know it, your screen time is going to skyrocket.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to hold you to that one, John. And next
Okay.
time you're on the podcast, I'm going to follow up.
I'll
Ask
give
and
you
see
some-
what your TikTok experience is.
Give me some feedback.
Yeah, I'm going to see if you have any good dances that you guys can teach me.
Definitely
again-
dad dancing.
Well, again, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Publisher Lab. You can find all of our stuff, all of our write-ups on publisherlab.org. And we'll see you again here next week. Thank you for joining the Publisher Lab.